if I see anything that's developing right now that has the legs to get much bigger, not that I don't think it's not going to end in disaster, but DeFi, I think there's a lot of interesting discussion and energy around DeFi, and I think there's a lot of elements that make it primed to expand. And I think it's one of those things that could be very effective at luring people in to the system, and then they don't realize the risks until it's too late. So I do see that as something that get much bigger.
Really would be wild to see a giant crypto bull run driven by ERC20 tokens that turn out to be vaporware and then crash.
You mean 2017?
That's right. It's like there's remarkably strong parallels between between vaporware ICOs and vegetables, DeFi vegetables. I don't know. It's fucking amazing how far DeFi is getting on hyperinflation as the use case. I think DeFi is really fucking cool. Obviously, I do. I'm building in it, and it has huge fucking potential. I also think that it's like, and I think it's created an amazing opportunity for itself and for crypto as a whole and for Bitcoin. I also think it's like really important that it capitalizes on that with great products, and I don't think that's a given. I think that there's like a real worry that will not happen, and that this will end like 2017. And that was sort of like one of the things that made me decide to go kind of all in on Serum, is like, okay, this is kind of what I feel is going to like determine whether this just pops and everyone is sad, or whether something kind of great comes out of it. It's like, you get all these customers and money and attention, and like, do you build something great with that, or is it sort of like, is there an emperor has no clothes moment at the end where everyone's like, oh wow, that's what we spent the last few months on? That's sort of embarrassing.
I guarantee you that happens.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry. I hate to be this guy, but you guys are asking for it. I don't even know what DeFi means. First of all, I don't think it carries a clear definition, and so I'll first of all start with that. Secondly, an important thing about 2017 is arguably why ICOs drove Bitcoin up, and ultimately the rest of the market, is because you had to own Bitcoin to really participate. So for most of the products, there was that narrative that entering the market was through Bitcoin, exiting the market was through Bitcoin. And so I don't even know what DeFi is, but if that narrative plays parallel. Thirdly, the fact that our narrative in the midst of another successful halving, CME products, maybe on the brink of an ETF, is that something on Ethereum is going to drive this thing to $1 trillion asset. I don't know how confident I am in that. And then I also don't think comparing a 2020 Bitcoin to 2013 Cyprus crisis, I mean, what it takes to move this, market 1% versus what it took in 2013, I don't think that's near parallel to say, yeah, in hindsight, we could say Cyprus, but at the time, who knows? Maybe someone bought a bunch of heroin on the dark web. Versus now, I mean, to move this thing a 10% move, I mean, that's no joke. I think it's not going to be like a simple accidental, like, I don't know if those are near parallels. So I hate to be that guy. It's totally okay to disagree and have like normal debate, but I wasn't going to sit here and shake my head on that one. I got to disagree on pretty much every single point.
Let it rip, baby.
Sorry, man.
I don't even agree with Jack. And we're both Bitcoiners, but I think I see more value in DeFi than Jack does. And if
really quickly, Pierre, can you explain it to me? Because maybe I do see value in DeFi. I don't even know what it is.
Yeah, so here's how I would try to explain DeFi to a Bitcoiner. You're trying to minimize the regulatory attack surface to, in what I've seen so far, really the most centralized thing is the price oracles, right, coming from outside the system. And so if you can minimize the attack surface to just the price oracle or some kind of set of incentives around it, then you can have financial products that are accessible in a permissionless system, right? And that, to me, is kind of the promise of it, which is very appealing. We can get into the engineering and what Sam's working on and all of the all of that. But I actually want to tie it back to the narratives, right? To me, like there's like two, and is that a fair explanation, Jack?
Yeah, I mean, like we'll go offline because I really do. I mean, I'm not being sarcastic. I really do want to understand it because it's clearly the bee's knees, and I feel like the dummy in the room. But for the life of me, man, I have no idea what the difference is.
So I can take a shot at it as someone who's sort of a DeFi skeptic 6 months ago, and who's now feels like way more excited than I used to, while also thinking vegetables are stupid. And here's sort of how I think about it. First of all, I want to separate DeFi from Ethereum. I think that probably wasn't your point, but I do want to make that explicit that like Ethereum it doesn't scale. I mean, independent of whatever else you think about ICOs and DeFi and things like that, 7 transactions per second is not enough for all of crypto put together. That's like not enough for a single application. So, and I think that's just like, I don't know. I'm sort of like, I'm just fucking done pretending that there's ambiguity about that or that there's any merit in claiming that's not true. It's just not enough. Like that, it's just like it's orders of magnitude too low. So, okay. But let's put that aside because there are faster chains. And so whatever, you sort of like everyone stands up, walks over 10 feet and sits down at something 10,000 times faster. So why is that cool? And I think what I'd say is like, and I'm going to try and put this in I think maybe this will do nothing, but maybe phrasing that'll mean something to you. Is like Bitcoin's what you believe in, right? That's what you're really excited about. And you know, by the time that you're in the place where like you're like, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this Bitcoin in my wallet. That's not like you don't need DeFi anymore. If you're at that state and that's your steady state, you just want like you care about wallet technology and Bitcoin. That's it. But first of all, something had to happen to get you to that state. You had to buy the Bitcoin. And right now, the way that you do all the transactions for Bitcoin is through very non-Bitcoin-like things. And I say this as someone who runs an exchange that, has Bitcoin on it. FTX is very different from Bitcoin. Bitcoin is this giant censorship-less, permissionless, global, decentralized, anonymous network. And a centralized exchange is like a company that makes decisions. And that's very much not Bitcoin. Now, I think it's super important for getting Bitcoin to people. Like, I think, they're really invaluable pieces. But and this is an if like you want the sort of Bitcoin ethos to also apply to the things that get Bitcoin to people in the first place, the rails right now are not that to a centralized exchange. And what DeFi can do is potentially replace a lot of that with blockchain. It can replace that exchange with blockchain. And in the same way that Bitcoin itself is decentralized and censorship resistant, and you can't like steal someone's Bitcoin just because you say so. The same thing is true of a well-built decentralized exchange and financial ecosystem. And like if you want to acquire Bitcoin in the most Bitcoin way possible, it would be through blockchain operations. And you can do that on a DEX, and that's super fucking cool. And in particular, I sort of like am really drawn to the vision of a fully on-chain DEX, not like sort of some layer 2 thing, but like, the matching engine, the orders are all on chain. You have full custody of your funds, except for the 1 second that you're spending with them sending an order. And even then, it's following deterministic on-chain procedures. Like there's no sort of like black box. It's like, no, I can look at the fucking code there. And that's like, to the extent that you're really excited about Bitcoin as a thing to own, I feel like this is a way more way more in line with that in terms of at least how to acquire it and how to transact with it. And, you want to like, any sort of financial transaction that can happen, this is sort of the analogous way to do it. And I think that's super powerful and super cool. And I think that if you do it really well and you try really hard, you can make it work. And current DeFi doesn't do that. Current DeFi is a fucking pain in the ass to use. I mean, you use Uniswap, and it's amazing what they've accomplished given their constraints. But that's because their constraints are amazing. Their constraints are really, really constraining. And they managed to build a thing where you can trade, given that, but it's expensive and slow, and you can't really provide liquidity and stuff. But you can do it right if you get the speed and the right technology. And I think that's sort of the core of my pitch for DeFi is you take that same ethos and you apply it to as much of the financial ecosystem as you can. You just get it on chain, and ignore all the hyperinflation and yield and stuff like that. That's not what's going to appeal to you. That's sort of like, just think of that as marketing. Think of that as like, what the sort of the marketing guys came up with to get users to start using the system, but not what the system ultimately is going to be.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate that. And my response, and CK, you interrupt me and drag this to wherever you want to go if we're lagging on this topic, but I think my skepticism is rooted in not the ambition. I think the pitch is great, and in theory, if you're able to accomplish that, I think you're going to generate a lot of wealth for yourself and do good for the world. It sounds fantastic. I think my skepticism is rooted in the fact that I've been an engineer in this space for close to 8 years, and I think that the trade-offs in whatever we want to call it, blockchain, cryptocurrency, are pretty well defined. So the idea that you can create a decentralized on-chain DEX, intuitively, just being so familiar with the technology, it doesn't make a ton of sense. And I had a popular back and forth with Vitalik on Twitter recently, where my problem isn't his ambition. My problem is the marketing, to your point, Sam. My problem is I don't think any of the engineering has been proven to be fact. I think that people are risking a lot of money by participating, but are being encouraged to do so. To hear someone say that this is going to be the narrative that drives retail into this, that's really fucking scary, because I don't think it's safe. I don't think it's secure. And I think people are being potentially misled, and I think people are going to get burned. And so, when you say like a decentralized network that's able to provide all these values, well, what's decentralized? Because I know Ethereum is marketed to be the DeFi leader, and maybe that's my misinterpretation of reading on the internet. Maybe I'm looking in the wrong places, but Pierre and I and others have come to find out Ethereum can't even tell me the supply. No one's running an Ethereum node. So then by definition, to me, that's not decentralized whatsoever. So what's your definition of decentralized? What's your definition? I mean, I think,
Right.
I just think there's a lot. And so to your point, and I'm not accusing you of it, there's plenty of skepticism. It's a big if, and you've placed your bet, and there's plenty of upside. And I think the R&R on your bet is probably logically sound. I just wish that, the disclaimers were more accurate. I wish that it wasn't the narrative to drive the next bull market. Like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. If a bunch of retail's getting in because DeFi, it just feels disingenuous to a point where, you start to feel a little guilty. And it almost takes away from a lot of the good sound work that's going on in this space. So that's my problem. I have no problem with the ambition and with the principal idea. It just, as an engineer, it just screams skepticism and borderline just disingenuous, almost malicious marketing.
Yeah, I totally hear you. And to be explicit, like, I'm not trying to defend like a lot of the current facts of how it works. Like I'm not a fan of a lot of the marketing techniques that are going on right now. And I also think that technologically it's really under-delivered. And I think I totally agree with you on that. Like, there's sort of this vision, and we haven't gotten there. Like, we're not, like, the products are not close to that. You do some and you're like, no, this is not there. That's not what, and I think it's just unambiguously not there. And I think the vision is great, and I think it just hasn't been delivered, and unambiguously hasn't been delivered. The place where I think I would diverge, the only place I would diverge from what you said, I think, is on how possible it is. And I would like explicitly split out how possible it is for whether it's been at all realized. And the reason is, like, to your point about a fully on-chain, more order book and matching engine, it is possible. And I don't know if you want, like, I think screen sharing is disabled right now, but if someone wants to enable it, I can send an order on one right now. Like, we have it up and running, and you can do it. You can't use Ethereum. Ethereum cannot support that, but use a faster chain, and you can do it. And there are a lot of trade-offs here, but some of these actually aren't so much trade-offs. Some of these are, okay, 3 years later, we've learned a lot. Ethereum has taught us a ton and moved the space forward so far. And the ability to tokenize something is amazing, and we owe such a debt to it. But also, it's sort of like, you need to keep innovating, and I think that, like, some of this is like, no, we can get a lot faster now without sacrificing too much, just by, like, knowing what we know now and optimizing for what we have available now. And weirdly, no one's not knowing, but many people aren't doing it. But that doesn't mean you can't. In fact, you can. And yeah, the vision of a fully on-chain DEX with an order book, and it's doable, and we made one.
So sure, yeah. I mean,
Jack, I don't mean to cut you off. I actually want to let David and Erik both jump in because they both look very interested. So let's go with Erik and then go to David. But Yeah, this has gone in an interesting direction.
So, yeah, great conversation. I don't mean to sound like old man Bitcoin here, but there was a time back in Bitcoin's history, not so long ago, where we accepted that this was experimental technology, that people shouldn't put their life savings into it, that there were good projects and scammy projects, and you need to do your own due diligence and you need to be careful. And you need to take some personal goddamn responsibility if you're going to step into these waters. And Bitcoin was not treated as this God on a hill, which is imperfect, and everything else that tries to build anything innovative is just like beneath you. Ethereum is 5 years old. DeFi is 2 years old. Let these things exist and thrive and experiment and break and reimagine themselves, because that is what Bitcoin did when it started. That's how you build a new financial system. And what Bitcoin has done for money, DeFi and some of these other protocols are trying to do this for other parts of the financial system. The financial system of the planet is not just sound money. So if Bitcoin has captured that market, great. It's done a fantastic job of that. But it is not the entire financial system. And I think that a lot of these projects deserve credit for their experimentation and for the fact that without permission and without licenses, they are stepping out and trying things that will undoubtedly fail more often than they succeed. But thank God someone's doing it.
David.
Yeah, and Jack, what I would say is my point earlier is that these are narratives. I'm not saying that this is like these things are baked and ready to go. ICOs were the narrative that drove the last bubble. ICOs were a shit show. I don't think there are any ICOs that have delivered, really. But the
Ethereum.
idea of, maybe Ethereum. But the idea of being able to crowdsource a project and raise money from people around the world and have permissionless fundraising is in and of itself a cool idea. No matter how many scams boom and bust along the way, doesn't delegitimize the power of the idea. And so I think, DeFi is just the beginning of permissionless financial services across the board. And, I think that there's going to be a lot of train wrecks. I think, none of this stuff is ready. I mean, even Sam, the stuff that you say is dramatically improved over Ethereum is nowhere close. And, to Erik's point a second ago about sound money, I mean, sound money at the end of the day sits at the core of the entire, any permissionless financial services that we build. Bitcoin is permissionless value, and value is at the core of all of those products. And so, no matter what we build, I think Bitcoin is the de facto value store of the entire crypto system. And Ethereum or any of these other chains are just a proxy for people to be able to leverage their Bitcoin into other financial services, permissionless financial services. So yeah, but I narratives, the thing about narratives is that they're just narratives. And the thing about Bitcoin is like, the meme that's like, this is why we don't deserve nice things, is like Bitcoin is the definition of that meme. It's like any idea that has like a sprinkle of like a sprinkle of interesting to it will be taken by people in this space to the absolute maximum until it becomes a straight scam. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing. It's a bad thing. But it's just, that's the nature of Bitcoin. And when I got into Bitcoin, the same stuff was going on. I mean, what was the old site called? Global Stock Exchange, GBLSE? Is that it?
GLBSE.
Yeah. But, I mean, so what is old is new again in Bitcoin. But I mean, I don't see this pattern of, scams and bullshit and fluffy marketing going away when you have a technology that 99% of people don't know what the fuck it is and are very susceptible to bullshit. And so I'm not endorsing bullshit. I'm just saying we got to be prepared for bullshit to be a thing. That doesn't validate the core ideas around it.
Yeah. All right. My response to that is going to be, firstly, a disclaimer. I don't think ETH should not exist, Erik. I think you're right. That sense of ambition and willingness to try is what pushes the human race forward. Better yet, this industry. And so I'm not of the opinion that it should die. And I also, disclaimer, many people probably listening know my family background. My grandfather was chairman of the Chicago Board of Trade. My dad was one of the bigger futures brokerage traders and founders in Chicago. I come from trading. I come from, if the Mallards family can make money in a market, we're going to make it. And so, my stepmom famously sat next to Vitalik before ETH launched, and we were part of the pre-sale. And, are people on Twitter going to be upset with my family because we owned ETH at one point and made a ton of money on it? Maybe. I don't care. I would make a market on toenails if it was liquid enough and make money on it.
Oh yeah.
We're traders. It is what it is. So one, I have no problem with people making money. Markets are efficient. Markets are binary. For every winner, there's a loser. And if there's, stupid money that's going to be out there, smart money is going to go take it from them. And that's fine. My problem is just, from a software standpoint, Bitcoin has made certain design decisions on purpose. When it comes to engineering, it is the way it is for a reason. If you have goals like decentralization, the ability to self-audit and maintain a copy of this ledger known as the blockchain without trust, it has made certain decisions, Bitcoin Core has, in order to maintain those properties. And it is extremely dangerous to market a lot of these technologies that have not proven whatsoever that they've found a computer science technological breakthrough, which by definition, if they were to succeed, they would have to. And so as a human being that was raised on principles, on being a good guy, I just have an issue with that being the narrative. Now, if that becomes a narrative and I can make money on it, I will. I promise you that. But as being a good guy, I cannot sit here and market it and let retail get in it under false presumptions. I think that it's wrong. And so that's my only thing, is to see a lot of this marketing going on. It just grinds my gears a little bit because there's a lot of sound engineering and computer science going on that's really great. And it sucks to kind of see people take advantage of that and maliciously market and be disingenuous. And just as a good guy, I have a problem with it. I don't think ETH should die. I think people should experiment with whatever they want to. I don't think Bitcoin should be the bully in the room. I just wish the disclaimers were more honest, because it is going to take a similar computer science breakthrough to what Satoshi came up with to pull off what is now an array of claims. I mean, you're going to have the equivalent of 100 Bitcoin white papers to pull off a fraction of what's promised. And as an engineer, I haven't seen any proof of it, and I'm very, very skeptical. And that's my only point. And as a trader, I'll trade and make money on ETH all fucking day. Of course,
isn't the promise though of second layer technologies on top of Bitcoin is to bring this functionality that we're talking about to Bitcoin? I mean, isn't that the whole point of Blockstream, of Liquid Network? Isn't that the whole point of RGB? So these technologies are not fundamentally separate from Bitcoin. I mean, it's just that they're not there yet because building on Bitcoin is harder because it requires you to do it right and not make, black magic. So
and I would argue, though, really quickly, that I think the disclaimers have been extraordinarily fair. I mean, the Lightning Network has limits in place that only allow you to do so much on the protocol because we all know where it is. We all know its age. And to hear Vitalik get on a podcast and say a fast sync light node serves the same functionality as a full node, that's just a misleading lie. And whether he's doing it on purpose or whether he's just uneducated, either way, it serves the same reality that sucks, man. Bottom line, I'm not even going to rant about this one, but that type of shit is going to piss people off. It's going to piss Bitcoin Core contributors off. And that's bullshit. And so that's my greater point. I don't think Lightning, to a degree too, I'd like to quickly say a lot of this you can't control. If media and narratives are going to run away from you, there's only so much you can do. And, in my tweet storm, I said, there's a lot I respect about Vitalik and there's a lot I feel bad for. I mean, it's really outside of his hands, and he is responsible when things go great and he's responsible when things go terrible. And that's an unfair position to be in. But generally speaking, I think a lot of these altcoin communities can do a much better job at being honest about their projects and making it about the computer science feats that they have to accomplish rather than ushering in retail when I think it's, undebatably irresponsible. That's my problem.
No one seemed to have a problem with Vitalik in 2011 espousing that Bitcoin would be the future of money. His marketing back then seemed to be okay.
Well, I
even
mean,
though that was a very young and an untested system.
to be fair,
That was okay. Somehow,
wasn't-
because it's a different chain, people seem to treat him differently.
I'm still waiting for my quantum ASIC. Just want to
Okay,
point that out.
all right. That's enough
wasn't-
toxicity. That's enough tribalism. I think that I think that Andreas Antonopoulos framed it best, which is that Ethereum does not need to care about its supply like Bitcoin does, right? Because it's a fundamentally different value proposition. So, like Paul Tudor Jones in his note, he's talking about, I need an inflation hedge. I need a scarce asset. I'm gonna just buy a boatload of Bitcoin, and that's going to be the product I need. Someone who needs to create a decentralized financial system, they're going to have to go in a different direction. And I think that fundamentally, you don't need the same level of decentralization for DeFi that you need for scarce money. Like the amount of pressure from inflationists has no equal. Right. And so that's where you want to have maximum decentralization. And that's why I think that, the Bitcoin ethos is extremely appropriate to the question of money. But the moment we start talking about airline miles or gift cards or like these other conceptions of value, like we don't care about inflation in those systems, right? Like you're not supposed to hold those things as inflation hedges or as a long-term investment. And so that's where we can make trade-offs. And to Jack's, where I agree with Jack, is that the marketing on the Ethereum side specifically, I want to call them out because I think this is specific to them, has gotten completely out of control in the direction of ETH is a scarce asset, ETH is money, we should be using ETH as collateral. I think that that's incorrect. They should be using ETH as gas, as fuel in the system, and they should be using wrapped Bitcoin as the collateral in the system because fundamentally that's the more liquid asset, and so it just makes more sense. And I'd argue the same thing about kind of the decentralized exchanges, right? Like part of where I disagreed with Sam was that I still think that fiat crypto pairs are always going to be the most liquid on centralized exchanges because fundamentally where the user is coming from is from the fiat world, where they do have a bank account and they're going to connect it with an exchange and they're going to send their dollars or euros or yen or whatever other else currency to the centralized exchange. And then they'll go into Bitcoin, they'll go into Ethereum, and then they can go to Uniswap and they can go buy any token in the world, right? That's when they've accessed the free market at that point. But so I would actually just draw some divergence there. But to go back to Sam's point of DeFi enabling, fiat crypto pairs, I think that gets into the stablecoin discussion and then the collateralized lending conversation, where I actually do think that the way that DeFi has evolutionarily adapted is realizing that it can enable this carry trade that I was talking about in the centralized context of, borrowing from fractional reserve banks to buy a scarcer asset, to buy Bitcoin. Here's the crazy part. ETH is more scarce than US dollars, right? So like, even if we have uncertainty about ETH account balances and all of this reconciliation stuff, that's fine. It's still scarcer than US dollars. And so the carry trade still makes sense of borrowing US dollars to buy ETH. And so I think that we're going to continue to see DeFi enable more leverage in the system. And the more Bitcoin gets wrapped and put onto Ethereum, like the Ethereum maximalists or the Ethereum influencers, they'll say, "Oh, isn't that embarrassing for Bitcoiners?" Right? They're like, "Oh, we're taking their assets." Like, no, like this is what your platform is advertised to be able to do. If it could not wrap Bitcoin, then you have not only like failed to deliver what Bitcoin delivered, but you've also failed to deliver what you wanted to. So I think that all of these systems are symbiotic and are working well together, but there has to be clarity that the scarcest asset in the world is Bitcoin. And that's going to continue to be the case. And I haven't seen any evidence that that's going to change within the foreseeable future.